Well, man, love to be able to sing with you guys. Man, what a joy. Grab some scripture. You guys ready to dig into the Word? Here we go. Ready or not, we're going to do it. If you're listening in online, welcome as well. Glad to have you guys joining us tonight. Turn to Luke 8. Luke chapter 8. There's some note sheets back there on the counter if you guys want to grab a note sheet. They're back there. I don't know if they made them around to the tables or not, but feel free to get up and grab one. There'll be some blanks to fill in as we go if you want to fill in blanks. Luke 8. We're in the second week of our Christmas series. So what we're doing is we're taking different lines from Christmas carols that are particularly gospel-centered and just looking at the Word, seeing where this truth lines up with the Word. Some Christmas carols you sing, and they have nothing to do with Jesus. They're just about the holiday time and things that are normal to celebrate. And then other songs have just real poignant lines, just real gospel-centered kind of lines. And so we're trying to zero in on some of those each week. And so as we will this week, you'll see where we go. You can even see it on the screen already, light and life. To all he brings, that's where we're headed. But before we get there, I'm not sure about you, but I love sunshine. Anybody love sunshine? Well, I love bluebird days. I love after it's snowed a ton and you go out and there are multiple inches on the ground of snow and the sun just blazing and it's beautiful. Love the sun. Growing up, even here in Colorado, I didn't grow up in Colorado, but I remember after moving here, hearing people talk about 300 days of sunshine in Colorado. They talk about Colorado is one of the sunniest states that there is of the 50 states. I'm trying to figure out, where does that come from? And did a little research this week and realized that I think based on, if this is true, what I saw, that if the sun comes out for 30 minutes during the day, then you could say it was a sunny or partly cloudy day or partly sunny day. So I'm not sure the truth behind whether that's an exaggeration or not. Depends on who you talk to. But growing up down south in Texas, the summers are hot and you're always out in the sun any chance you can get. And for me, in college, we went to the lake as much as we could in Arkansas just to get out in the sun. You wash your car, you sunbathe, you spend time at a water park, you spend time again on the lake, and I love just laying in the sun. Sometimes when we get spring days up here, but it's still cold, and then Denver starts to hit the 80s, man, I love to go down to Denver and just hang out in the park and soak up some rays. And our dog, Duke, he's a little Yorkie, and even inside, he'll find a little stream of sunshine kind of coming in the window, and he'll find that spot. And even if it's just a little bitty spot, he'll find it and just sprawl out and lay out in the sun. I want to say the sun is amazing. I put a picture of it up there. Just Googled picture of the sun for you guys. We don't often get to see it like this. But man, what an amazing thing the sun is. And I'm not sure about the last time was that you thought about our sun. You just kind of take it for granted like most of us, sun comes out and it's warm and you may be like, man, that feels good. But we don't typically go revisit facts about the sun very often unless you're in elementary school, high school, you learn facts. And so I hope these facts amaze you afresh like they did me this week as I did some research on the sun. So we're going to spend just a couple minutes here reviewing facts on the sun, and you'll see how it plays in here. But the three things, if you're taking notes, the three things specifically that I was amazed by when I did research this week. The sun's enormity, number one. The sun's enormity, the size of the sun. Secondly, the sun's power. And thirdly, the sun's proximity. So it's enormity, its power, and its proximity. And I just pulled some interesting facts up. These were interesting to me. Maybe you'll find them interesting as well. So it's enormity. Anyone remember how many miles in diameter the sun is from grade school? Or anyone remember? Miles in diameter, the sun. Humor us and just guess. And we can all laugh at your guess when we say the correct answer. Just guess. How many miles in diameter? Huh? 100,000 miles. Who else? Million miles. 25,000 miles. You guys, so here's the diameter of the sun. 870,000 miles. So a couple of you guys are kind of close. 870,000 miles in diameter across the sun, the core, the diameter. So I got to thinking, well, what's that in comparison to the Earth? And here's how that compares. How many Earths can fit inside the sun? 1 million Earths can fit inside the sun. If that doesn't boggle your mind, you're like, man, our sun's pretty big. It doesn't look that big from where we are, but it's huge. And so I'm like, well, how do I, as a person, compare to the size of the sun? I love comparisons, being able to wrap our brains around the size by comparison. How do I, just a man, compare in size to the sun? And so I had to do a little bit of math, and I searched this out as well. There were some sites that had done kind of similar studies or research. And so here's a statistic that will boggle your mind. 10 billion trillion people could fit inside the earth. So if we're talking about just the earth as this ball, if we were going to pack people into the inside of the earth, so the number is 10 billion trillion inside the earth. And so again, that's not even the sun. So then we get to a number even bigger when we think about what size we are in comparison to the sun. And the number is a number that we have a hard time even wrapping our heads around, of how many people could fit inside the sun. That number is 10 octillion. If you didn't know that was even a word associated with numbers, it's 10 octillion. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, it's one with about 28 zeros after it. And so that's how many people could fit into the sun. That's how dwarfed we are in light of how big the sun is. That's how much bigger the sun is than you. It's really beyond comprehension. It's enormous. The second thing striking about the sun, again, is its power. Its power. How hot is it on the surface of the sun? Anybody remember how hot it is on the surface of the sun? Any guesses? Let's do this in Fahrenheit. Here's the number. 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface of the sun. That's not in the core of the sun or down below the surface. It gets hotter as you go toward the core, but 10,000 degrees, and we think we're going to melt when we hit lower 80s up here, right? It hits lower 80s, we're like, woo, it's hot. 10,000 degrees. The sun's energy is made up of a fusion between helium and hydrogen, as I understand it, and to manufacture the same power that the sun has. Now, this was an interesting fact I read. I trust that it's pretty accurate. To manufacture the same amount of energy or power the sun has, you need to detonate. This is in terms of dynamite. So you would need to detonate 100 billion tons of dynamite per second to match the energy and the power of the sun. And so just like that, if you were to count seconds, 100 billion tons of dynamite going off every second, that would get close to replicating the power of the sun. And again, that really goes beyond our comprehension. Third reality I mentioned about the sun that I was amazed by is its proximity or its position to us. And you hear this stuff in grade school, but maybe you haven't thought about it in a while. The sun's proximity to us. This was the one fact I remembered from school. The sun is 93 million miles from us. 93 million miles away from us. Scientists tell us it's the sun's gravity that keeps Earth in its orbit. Without the sun's gravity, Earth would just be on a straight plane. We wouldn't be in orbit circling. We'd just be on a straight plane going out through space. And our proximity to the sun is what allows life to exist. And surely you remember this fact that if we were a little bit closer to the sun, we'd burn up. And if we were a little bit farther from the sun, we would freeze. It's how our proximity is what allows life to exist. Interesting quote from National Geographic Kids. We get that at our house and found this. It's talking about the sun. It's the source of all the heat and light that makes flowers bloom, songbirds croon, and sunbathers swoon. That's National Geographic Kids for you. And it says, life wouldn't exist without it. Really simply put, life would not exist without it. And as bad of a rap as the sun gets these days, people talk all about, man, you don't want to be in the sun. You got to put sun lotion on and wear head to toe covered if you're going to be out in the sun. We're a little bit different up here with our environment, the intensity of the sun and the UVs. But as bad a rap as the sun gets and sunlight gets, we have to remember the benefits of short-term exposure to the sun's rays. Sunlight is a crucial ingredient for overall health. And I just looked it up. Depending on what website you read, there are all these different lists of health benefits. And some of these are hard and fast factual stuff, and then some of them are a little bit more speculation, but these are pretty scientifically backed here. Protects against inflammation, lowers high blood pressure, helps muscles, improves brain function and mood, and may even protect against certain types of cancer. And let's not forget vitamin D, right? The vitamin D that we get from the sun that can be preventative to a whole host of elements. If you just search vitamin D deficiency, you'll pull up all kinds of stuff on the internet. Knowing all of this about the sun, I'm not going to talk about the sun anymore. It's beautiful. But knowing this stuff about the sun, just revisiting some of these simple facts, is it any wonder Jesus is referred to in the Old Testament in Malachi as the Son of Righteousness? The Son of Righteousness, risen with healing in his wings, as to how it's referred to in Malachi chapter 4. And see, this quick lesson on the Son really sets the stage for this week's carol line, light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Again, it's a line from one of my favorite songs. Anybody guesses what line it's from? Do you remember? It's from Hark the Herald Angels Sing. So many lines from the song are just so rich with gospel truth. And we'll sing it at the end tonight. But there are multiple places we could go tonight in considering Jesus as light and life, bringing healing. But I wanted us to see it firsthand in story form, which is why I had you turn to Luke 8. And we'll see kind of him, Jesus, as light and life and healer in firsthand. And again, in the form of story. And so we'll work through a handful of verses tonight and see Jesus as light and life and healer. So we'll jump in here in verse 40 in Luke 8 and read down through here. Here's how it goes if you want to follow along in your own copy. Now, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, and they were all waiting for him. And so he had stepped away. If you can go back and read the context this week to read all that's going on there and why he's returning back, but that's where we're jumping in. He's returning. They welcomed him, the crowd, and they were all waiting for him. Verse 41, and there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, only 12 years of age. And she was what? She was dying. And Jesus went. The crowds, or the people pressed around him. So we have first character introduced here. We have Jairus, a ruler, a leader in the synagogue. He would have been a well-respected man, and being that he was a leader in the synagogue. Probably did pretty well financially as well, being that he had that job in the synagogue. And here he breaks with the majority of the members of the synagogue and believes in Jesus. And this is evidenced by what he does. He falls at Jesus' feet, and he knows Jesus can heal his daughter, and he falls at Jesus' feet. Jairus and his daughter are in great need. We talk about this all the time here. Our great need for Jesus. We see this here in Jairus and his daughter. They are in great need. And Jairus isn't afraid to admit it before everyone. Remember, this is in the context of a big crowd. Crowds pressing in on Jesus all around. And this is not in some kind of little private setting with Jairus as a synagogue leader that he falls at Jesus' feet. This is in the middle of a big crowd. In our context, it's the way I picture kind of the base, what the base of our ski mountains look like. The day before, Christmas Day, the day after, when we have those huge crowds that are standing at the bottom of the lift, and we're all kind of pressing in against each other trying to load the lift. It's in that kind of context that Jairus falls at Jesus' feet. He's not afraid to admit his need for Jesus among this huge crowd. Verse 43, let's keep reading here. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. And so we have this second character entering in to the scene with Jesus. First, it was Jairus, the synagogue leader. And now we have this woman who we will not ever know her name. Her name's not recorded here. Her condition, which essentially equates to having a constant, unending period, has put her in a dark and dire place. It's put her in a dark and dire place. See, according to Jewish law, she would have been ceremonially unclean all the time. Ceremonially unclean all the time because of her ailment, which means she could never participate in the synagogue life and couldn't even be touched lest she make someone else unclean. It's kind of the context of what's going on here. And this was most certainly an extremely lonely life for this woman that we don't even know her name. It would have been the life of a societal outcast. And according to their customs, she really shouldn't have even been in the crowd, all pressing in against everyone else. She would have ceremonially made other people unclean that came in contact with her. And we should start to see the contrast here between these first two characters that we just looked at. Jairus, the synagogue leader, well-known, well-respected man, and this woman with this condition for 12 years. She's an outcast, this nobody. Do you remember Jairus, he's a leader in the synagogue. This woman excluded from the synagogue. You have Jairus, who was likely rich, and this no-named woman who was ceremonially unclean all the time, likely poor. You have Jairus, who was respected. You have this woman who was rejected. You have Jairus, who was honored when he would walk out in town. People would be like, oh, I know him. That's Jairus. If Jairus wants something, you give Jairus what he wants or what he needs. He's a man of respect. And you have this no-named woman who would feel shame. She'd be ashamed. Yet, with their differences, there are a couple things that are the same. Jairus has a 12-year-old daughter dying. This woman, how many years has she had this condition? 12. 12 is what we just read. It's the same number of years. They're both in great need. And get this, in spite of all their differences, both recognize Jesus can meet their need. Jesus can bring healing. And I would just, as we study regularly, whether it's with our church in Fraser or here, we always get to the personal level. We always start to work down toward just information here in the Scripture and start to get personal. Do you believe that tonight? Do you believe that tonight, that Jesus can meet your need and Jesus can bring healing? That Jesus perfectly meets our deepest spiritual need? That if anyone can bring healing to the darkest parts of your heart, do you believe that about Jesus? Let's see how both of these play out, both of these stories. Verses 44 through 47. Let's keep reading here. This is speaking of the woman. Starts off there with she. Verse 41. She came up behind him, speaking of Jesus, and touched the fringe of his garment. And immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." Verse 47, and when the woman saw that she was not hidden, remember she's used to kind of hiding in the crowd so no one sees that she's there. It says, again, verse 47, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. See, Jesus did not ask in this sense of who touched him as if he did not know. Remember, we're talking about Jesus here. It's not like he's like, oh, wait a second, am I missing something around here? What just happened? What's going on is he's giving her a chance to pronounce what has happened to her in front of the crowds. He's just saying, hey, who was it that touched me? And he's given her an opportunity from move from hidden and shame into this public testimony. It's kind of funny here. We get to see the miracle version of the movie Inception. The miracle version of the movie Inception, a miracle within a miracle. Remember, Jesus was on his way to perform a miracle, and he performs a miracle. That's what's going on here, a miracle within a miracle. This woman is healed by touching the hem or edge or tassel of Jesus' robe. Wow, right? And again, he says he immediately knew what had happened. In the middle of this huge crowd, he gives the woman a chance to proclaim in front of everyone who she is and what's just happened. She tells the crowd about her condition, her bleeding, which parentheses has an immediate risk of embarrassment in that kind of setting, in a crowd, to say, well, here's my problem, here's the problem I've had for 12 years, and then go on to point everyone to Jesus, her healer, and how amazing that was. For this woman who had spent her time creeping around low in the crowd so she would not be seen, she proclaims Jesus as her healer. And notice her posture. She, like Jairus, bows at Jesus' feet in worship and submission. It's worth noting here, this idea of clean and unclean, being ceremonially clean and unclean. Because in our world, anything that's unclean, if you touch it, then all of a sudden you're not clean anymore. And I want to be sure we understand what's going on here, and follow me here. If my hands are clean, and I go up and pick up a pile of dog poop, does the dog poop become clean because my hands are clean? It's the opposite, right? Just the opposite. All of a sudden, the unclean gets what was clean unclean. That's the way things work. That's the way that's the way stuff works. Now, if someone spills some mud back here, mud comes off their shoe back here in the entryway. My hands are clean. I go pick up the mud. My clean hands do not make the mud clean. It's the opposite. But what we see here, Jesus reverses the process. See, the clean, Jesus, comes in contact with the unclean and makes what was unclean clean. The whole process is reversed. Verse 48. Let's keep reading. One short sentence here that's packed with so much emotion. Just one short sentence here. And as we read this one verse, remember who this woman was. Lonely, an outcast, a no-named woman. Let's read together verse 48, what Jesus says here. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." See, Jesus gives her a new identity of sorts. A new identity. He calls her daughter. Someone that would have been a social outcast, someone that people would not touch, and then she could not touch people. Gives her a new identity, daughter. This denotes belonging, right? This denotes belonging. You don't call just anyone daughter. She belongs to him now. The outcast has been healed, and now she has a family. How beautiful is that? But what is it that's made her well? Look at what we just read. What is it that's made her well? He says, daughter, you're what? What does it say? Your faith. Yeah, in some translations, your belief. Those two words are linked together. Your faith has made you well. She believed in him, that in him was light and life, and she went forth in peace. Maybe for the first time in 12 years, right? It's a long time. First time in 12 years. And I would ask, do you know Jesus like this? As light and life, as your healer? Does he know you and call you his son or daughter? Maybe tonight he's reminding you of your place in his family. Or by his Spirit, he's telling you of your need to be a part of his family, that you too might be called a son or a daughter of him. Let's keep moving. Verse 40, starting verse 49, we'll read down through verse 53, and we'll jump back to Jairus and his daughter and see what happens here. This is crazy stuff here. Verse 49, down again through verse 53. While he was still speaking, again, Jesus, still speaking with this woman, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." Which had to have been strange words, right? Had to have been strange words. We can read that, and if you've read this before, you kind of know what's coming. But if you don't know what's coming, like these guys, that had to have been a strange line from Jesus. Verse 51, and when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her. But he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they what? They laughed. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. Just get that picture. It'd be the equivalent of if we were gathered together at a funeral and at a funeral parlor or a church building, and we walk into this funeral and one of us goes, "Hey, I think they're just sleeping." Like what? People would they would either laugh or usher you out of the room, right? That's not appropriate, man. This is a funeral. That's what Jesus does here. And they laugh at him. Jesus tells Jairus how he'll see healing and life come to his daughter. And it's the same as what we just read with this woman. It's belief in verse 50. That's how he'll see life and healing come to his daughter. Belief, faith. And see, when I first read verse 53 about the laughing thing, about the kind of ridicule of Jesus, like them kind of ridiculing him of, are you crazy? She's dead. She's been dead a while now. First thing I thought of was how we're sometimes ridiculed for our faith in Jesus. It's kind of where my brain first went, of how we can be ridiculed sometimes for our faith in Jesus. But then my thoughts quickly turned inward to my own heart, inward to our own hearts, and maybe that's where more application is. See, maybe our own unbelief that Jesus could raise us up unto salvation, or our own unbelief that, get this, Jesus could bring healing to the dark, filthy parts of our hearts. Maybe we're the ones who unintentionally ridicule Jesus by our lack of belief in him as healer. And here's what I mean. There are places in our hearts, our experiences, things, whether it because patterns of sin we walked in for a long time, or because experiences in the past that have caused bitterness and hurt. There are dark places in our hearts, and when we hear that Jesus can set us free from those things and heal us from those things, sometimes in our lack of belief, we ridicule Jesus. Like, all right, Jesus, are you kidding me? Funny joke. I've been like this for a long time. We see the opposite in this woman. 12 years, she still fell at Jesus' feet, believing that Jesus could heal her. I just wonder, some of us have had these dark places in our hearts for a lot longer than 12 years. Or it may be a shorter time. Maybe it's been a year where you've walked in patterns of sin, or where you've held on to bitterness, or where you have, whatever it is, the dark, filthy parts of our hearts. Maybe we're the ones who unintentionally ridicule Jesus by our lack of belief in him as healer, in him as the one that can bring light and life to our hearts. Verse 54 through 56, let's see how this ends here. Verse 54. But taking her, again, this is Jesus, but taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given to her to eat. And this is just cool kind of stuff in there, as we're like, hey, she hasn't had food in a while. You probably need to give her some food, because I'm sure everyone in the room, their jaws are dropping. And this girl, as she's standing up walking, like, hey, get her some food. Hey, Close your jaw and get her some food. Yeah, it's amazing stuff, but she needs to eat some stuff. So, verse 55, let's start there again. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given her to eat. Verse 56, and her parents were amazed, which is probably an understatement. But he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Here's Jesus again. Not just healing, like he did with the miracle within a miracle. Not just healing, but more. Displaying power over death and establishing identity. Scholars say the word child, when he says child arise, is a term of endearment that we don't exactly have a translation for in English, but it's something to the equivalent of saying sweetheart, like you would to a young child, or dear one, or precious. See, with both of these girls, he brought light and life and healing and addressed their identity. The Son of Righteousness rose to the occasion. Jesus, the Son of Righteousness, rose to the occasion with healing in his wings, meeting their need like no one else could. Do you believe he can do the same for you? Again, we go to this kind of personal place. Do you believe he can do the same for you? Do you believe he can give you new life? Do you believe he can cleanse the dirtiest parts of your heart? Or the places you've held on to, like, no, Jesus, I love you, I love what you've done, but there's nothing you can do for this part of me. And in that, ridiculing and kind of putting off the salvation that he offers, the cleansing that he offers. See, there are some things about Jesus, the Son of Righteousness, that amaze me. When we think of Jesus as the Son of Righteousness, three things that amaze me. Number one, he's enormous. Number one, he's enormous. He's enormously holy and set apart, vastly different from us, right? It's hard for me to comprehend how holy, how pure, how worthy he is of our praise. Second thing that amazes me about Jesus, the Son of Righteousness, he is powerful. Powerful enough to heal the most broken parts of our hearts and our lives. And again, I just wonder if we believe that or not. Not just we say with our mouths. Do we look at those parts of our hearts and go, Jesus, I trust you with this. Believe I can find healing for this. Believe that you can give light and life. Third thing that amazes me about Son of Righteousness is his proximity to us. This is amazing, and it's what we remember and celebrate this time of year, right? What we sing right at the beginning. That he stepped down into darkness. He stepped down in flesh onto planet Earth. He draws close to us. Again, his proximity to us. He came to this earth to seek and to save the lost. Came to this earth to set the captives free. To be light and life. Do you believe Jesus, the Son of Righteousness, can bring healing, light, and life to you tonight? We're going to spend a few moments in prayer and then end, like I said, with Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And in that, maybe you sing some of the lines in that song with a different perspective than maybe what you had 25, 30 minutes ago when we started. That when you sing those lines about Son of Righteousness, risen with healing in his wings, light and life to all he brings. Maybe coming in here, you wouldn't have put yourself in that boat of, yeah, I believe he brings light and life to people. I believe that he does that in people's hearts, but not me or not here in this area. Maybe you can sing that truth with deeper conviction, knowing that that's true about him. Let's go to him in prayer and just encourage, as we always do here at the end of our time in the Word, to by his Spirit, let those words of truth pour over you. If there are places specifically in your heart that need healing tonight, let him kind of open the door of that dark closet. Let him shine light and life and healing into that. Let's go to him in prayer. Jesus, we confess you tonight as believers gathered together as the Son of Righteousness. Pray, Lord, that you would continue to amaze us at your enormity, at your power and the beauty of your proximity to us, how you draw close. And just like the sun is our ultimate source of life here on this planet, we confess that about you, Jesus. That Jesus, you were not modeled or created after the sun's design, that it was the opposite. The sun, you created Jesus, modeled and designed after you, after your character. We confess that in you, Jesus, is light and life and healing. I pray, Lord, that by the power of your Spirit, that truth falls fresh on us tonight. Thank you for the power of your word tonight, just even in the few minutes we spent here in Luke 8. I pray that as we sing together the lines of this old carol, that you would continue to impress truth upon our hearts and drive truth down deep into our hearts. I pray these things in your name. Amen. Charity's going to play through instrumentally on violin the song, and then when she's done playing through, we're going to all sing it just a cappella, just voices, lines of the old carol, Hark the Herald Angels Sing.